In this video, we are going to cover an overview of business functions. And we're going to be working with business functions a lot in this class. And if you continue on to business calculus, we will continue to dive deeper into business functions. So the first thing I want to talk about is revenue. So revenue represents how much money did I earn from sales or from selling things. And the summary for revenue is, we like to call it P times Q equals R, okay? Price charged per item times the quantity of items sold, Q, is equal to the revenue. And so I can see here then, I'm going to input the quantity of items and I'm going to get an output of revenue. If I write it over here in function notation with words, the thing inside the parentheses is the input. I input quantity of items sold, I get an output of revenue. If I wrote that as an ordered pair, I'd have quantity of items sold, input, and revenue is my output. Okay, so the important thing to remember there is money from sales. How much ended up in the cash register or in my pocket after a day of selling things? The next important business function is total cost, and this represents how much it costs to make and sell my items. Once you get into higher level business courses, you'll see it's not quite so straightforward. But for our purposes, we're going to just take the most simple cases. So total cost is equal to if we have any fixed costs plus what I'm calling variable cost. And fixed costs are just what the word says. It's if I have costs associated that don't change or don't vary based upon how many items I sell, those are fixed costs, or initial costs is another way we talk about them or refer to them. And then variable costs are the cost that varies or changes based upon how many items I produce. So how much does it cost per item times how many items? So this variable cost varies based upon how many items I sell. So we're going to go through some examples after this, but an example would be if I make and sell cupcakes. And let's say every week I go to a farmer's market and I set up my tent and to sell my cupcakes. So I pay, let's say, $100 at the farmer's market. That would be a fixed cost. It doesn't matter how many items I sell, I always have to pay $100 for the farmer's market. On top of that, I would have to say if I had 100 cupcakes versus 200 cupcakes, right? That's my variable cost. I want to see how much does it cost. Let's say it costs me $1 per each cupcake I make. That cost varies based upon how many cupcakes I make. So again, here we have a function where we're inputting the quantity of items sold. The cost, the total cost depends on how many cupcakes I produce. Okay, the next business function is profit. So profit is then, I like to think of it as how much money do I have left to put in my bank account after I pay my costs? So the way that I calculate profit is I take, well, how much did I earn in revenue? How much did I have at the end of the day in my cash register up here, revenue? But then I don't have that much money to put in the bank. I have to pay for the tent at the farmer's market, and then I have to pay for all the ingredients. So I have to subtract total costs. Okay, so think of, again, profit is how much money do I have left to put in my bank account? So I can define it as P of Q is revenue minus cost is equal to profit. And then we're going to look at special cases of profit, and particularly we're going to look at break even. And the break even point is just how many items do I need to sell to have a profit of 0? So how many items? I'm going to solve for the quantity of items I have when profit equals 0. So how many do I need to sell to give me a profit of 0? And because I can actually write this two different ways. I could just say I can just set P of Q equals 0, or I can write it in terms of revenue and cost. So if I do a little algebra here, I have revenue minus cost has to equal 0. So if I add the cost function to both sides, that gives me revenue is equal to cost. That's another way I can look at it. And so what I want to do is I want to solve for the quantity of items, which is my input, that result in a profit or an output of 0. Over here, graphically, I have the cost function here. And so I have an initial cost, let's say $100, and then for each additional cupcake I make and sell, my costs go up. And then I have my revenue function here. Okay, so you can see when I start out, if I don't sell any cupcakes, my costs are much bigger than my revenue because revenue would be 0. As I sell more and more quantity of cupcakes, the difference between revenue down here and cost is getting smaller and smaller, all the way to this point where revenue is equal to cost. That's my break-even point. Okay, when revenue equals cost, that means that profit, that's another way to say that profit is 0. And so up until that break-even point, I'm operating at a loss. And actually, we say that we're operating in the red. Once I get past the break-even point, now revenue becomes bigger than cost. And in this area, I'm operating in the black. I have a profit when I sell more than at the break-even point, and I have a loss when I'm selling less than the break-even point. At the break-even point, its profit is 0. That's the break-even point.